There are a number of mistakes that Iran made during the previous war, the 12-day war, and there are a number of mistakes that Iran is still making today in managing this major battle, the battle for survival. There are also a number of scenarios that determine how Iran should respond in the event that this war begins, so that Iran emerges victorious and the world avoids the worst case scenario. What are these mistakes? And what are these upcoming scenarios? This is exactly what we will discuss in this episode. Stay with us. Dear viewers, peace be upon you and God's mercy and blessings, and welcome to you today in this renewed meeting, God willing, from the series of episodes of Opinion Today. Dear viewers, it is clear that we are living in the final hours before the start of the American military strike in Iran. There are a number of indicators that confirm this strike will happen in the coming hours. For example, the most important indicator of this. For example, we find the truly remarkable decision announced by the authorities of the country of Bulgaria. Bulgaria, which is located in a strategic position important for carrying out such a strike on Iran, is about 1,500 kilometers away from Iranian territory and at about the same distance from the locations of American strategic bombers in northern Europe. Bulgaria, which overlooks the Black Sea and shares a border with Turkey, issued a decision to close Sofia International Airport to civilian flights during the night of February 23rd and 24th. This upcoming nighttime closure raised suspicion because it is a decision that suggests there will be significant and important military activity happening behind the scenes during this period. And especially so that everyone knows, this Bulgarian airport receives dozens, or to be exact, about 10 American refueling aircraft. This confirms that America is preparing perhaps for the largest military operation it has ever carried out, because this gives indications that this upcoming attack will not be only from the Iranian west. It won't be just Americans from the east of Iran, and it won't be only from the south of Iran, but it will even be from the north. The north of Iran is the closest distance to reach the capital Tehran. So the strike will be swift and decisive. In a single moment, everything must end, as I explained to you in these previous episodes. So what everyone needs to know today is that despite all this mobilization and all these massive military preparations, there must be another winning or decisive card coming from inside Iran. I mean, despite this massive military buildup, Trump can't risk a military operation at this time, at this stage, at this particular time. After the success of the Venezuela operation, he can't carry out such an operation again unless he's very certain of a very high chance of success. In other words, if he doesn't have a decisive card from inside Iran, maybe betrayal from within, maybe a military defection, or maybe something else. So the important thing, as usual, is that the strongest weapon the Americans have, and the one they always use to win such battles, is the weapon of traitors. Traitors from within. This happened recently in Venezuela, and it also happened in many previous experiences. And certainly today as well, there is a breach inside Iran that will also be relied upon in this operation, and preparations for it are underway today. So the important thing is that war is definitely coming. Therefore, I will start by talking about a series of mistakes that Iran has made, and other mistakes that Iran is still making to this day. The first mistake was about 7 or 8 months ago from today, during the previous war, the 12-day war, during this war, or during the preparations for this war. First of all, Iran's threats were not strong, Iran's threats were not decisive or deterrent enough. The United States and Israel carried out a surprise attack. They thought it would be decisive, they thought it would achieve their goals. They wanted to strike and strip Iran of all its missile and nuclear capabilities, including its air defenses and so on, in order to set back Iran's capabilities by 20 years. They believed that in reality there would be no real response, and therefore the air defense missiles they had would be enough to repel any Iranian response. But what happened was that it turned out Iran still had enough missile launch platforms that were probably hidden. So at that point, the Iranian response came in a really smart way, because the Israeli air defense missiles were depleted to the extent that the Israeli stockpile was completely exhausted. And Israel then started calling for help from America and a group of countries in the region to intervene to stop this war. So what was the mistake that Iran made? That it didn't take advantage of the opportunity at the time in a good way, so its response wasn't decisive enough for them. So either eliminate this entity completely, or at least gain agreements in its favor and force Israel to submit. The ceiling of the Iranian response was low. It wasn't at the required level. Today, the situation has changed. Israel has now benefited from this mistake because since the end of the 12-day war, which means we're talking about 7 or 8 months ago, and it is receiving a shipment of defensive missiles from America, building a new stockpile and a sufficient one, maybe enough for months, maybe enough in terms of these defensive missiles. On the other hand, we also find that Iran accepted to stop the war at that time without any conditions and without any real response to America. We really witnessed how the Iranian missiles moved and fell on Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar and how they hit the targets accurately. But was this response enough? Was this response a deterrent so that America wouldn't come back again with the same kind of threat we're facing today? Not at all. I mean, at that time, the aggression destroyed nuclear facilities, hundreds of missile launch platforms, and dozens of air defense systems. And in the end, the Iranian response was symbolic. They only struck an American military base after notifying them and after it was emptied of all personnel and important weapons. I mean, this was a big mistake that Iran made because it didn't set a high ceiling for its response. Every time Iran gets weakened, its capabilities are drained and its abilities are tested until it completely collapses. And here, Iran should take a lesson, for example, from North Korea. This country does whatever it wants, and recently sent troops to fight with the Russians against Ukraine. And yet they can't even talk about this country. They can't even make statements against this country or its leader. Why? Because it sets a high ceiling for its response. Disrespect means nuclear weapons right away. That's it. I mean, Kim Jong doesn't know the meaning of a symbolic response at all. Another thing is that Iran is now really threatening on all levels. It's threatening to strike Israel, and it's threatening to strike the military bases in these countries. The Gulf countries are threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz and launch wide-scale attacks through their regional proxies. Okay, that's good, but in reality this threat should have happened during the previous war. If this threat had come earlier, they wouldn't have dared to apply this pressure today. But the mistake Iran is making is the same mistake Iraq made before and the same mistake Libya made before. That means any concession, even if it's a small one, is a gain for them and will always help them get another concession. And so on, until this country collapses, and that will be the beginning, until they reach their real goal of stripping the country of any deterrent weapons. This country becomes exposed, poses no threat, and we can enter it and destroy it, and so on. The big mistake Iran is making is that it sets the red line too close to itself. It should set the red line far away, in a distant area, so that it remains in a comfort zone. Also, we find that the 12-day war came at a time when Iran was negotiating with the Americans. It was in the midst of these negotiations when Iran was attacked. So pay close attention, and today Iran is returning once again to these negotiations and sitting at the negotiating table. This is the biggest mistake Iran is making today. Why do I say this? Is it because they don't know how to take advantage of pretexts? What happened last June was a pretext that could be considered a betrayal. Iran should have used it as a pretext to say, no more negotiations from today, negotiations are over. I mean, they should have said, we can't sit with you at the negotiating table again after what happened in June. Because this excuse should have been used, especially, and everyone knows this, Trump doesn't use negotiations to reach an agreement, but to bring this country to its knees. He uses these negotiations as a weapon to buy time and to exert pressure with military force. That means a real state should refuse to enter into any negotiations under threat. Israel used this approach against Gaza, and it didn't bring results, even though this method was used only against it. Resistance, when we talk about a state, we mean resistance, and despite that, this approach didn't succeed, so that's a mistake. Iran should have refused to enter negotiations in this way, because now what is happening? America is just putting on pressure and buying time until it finds an opportunity, like internal betrayal, for example, or making sure that Iran is weak and then starting the attack. I mean, there is no point in such negotiations. So now, these mistakes have already happened. What should Iran do now? Should it make sure that its threats today are taken seriously? If the aggression happens, the response will be comprehensive. I mean, it should be said frankly, the response will be comprehensive. The proxies will strike the Strait of Hormuz. It will be closed immediately. The Bab al-Mandab Strait will also be closed by its proxies, by the Sana'a government. Iranian missiles will strike the entity, will strike all American military bases in the region, and even more than that, they might even strike the countries themselves. Even the facilities of those countries that allow American and Israeli forces to use their land or airspace in this aggression. The Iranian Navy will attack all American military ships in the region and will seize all commercial shipping vessels that are connected to America, whether they are American or linked to American insurance companies. So Iran truly has many deterrents and power cards. It must not repeat previous mistakes and should use all of these cards. Because the situation now has become a matter of destiny and the conflict has turned into a struggle for survival. If Iran makes any concession now, that's it. This will be the end of Iran. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Peace be upon you and God's mercy and blessings. See you next time.